Broadcasting around the world, this is On the Record with Christian Briggs. Serious talk about what's happening around the world and how it affects you. Unfiltered truth for a world on edge. Follow us on X at BMC_HAM. Live in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Christian Briggs, the host of On the Record with me. Today, I invited my buddy Christopher, not Walker.
That's correct.
He gets confused sometimes when he's walking down at the airport. He always gets his autograph asked for.
All the time.
All the time. Looks just like him.
The Continental.
Yeah, the Continental. That's right. We're going to go to the hotel. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Iran today. We're going to talk about specifically what are the do's and the don'ts that we've seen so far. We're going to talk about the consequences. Aramco, for anybody who hasn't heard of Aramco, that's the largest oil company in the world, publicly traded out of Saudi Arabia. Aramco CEO warns of catastrophic consequences for oil markets. CEO Amin Nasser painted the Iran war as the biggest crisis the region's oil and gas industry has ever faced in history. I think it's pretty much global history because the disruption is so bad. And it destroyed a couple economies there for about 4 days, apparently. They were on the verge of just being annihilated because of $120 oil. So we're going to be right back. And we are on the record today with Christian Briggs and Chris Walker. So stay tuned.
This podcast is brought to you by Hard Asset Management. We have the lowest prices on all precious metals. Call us at 844-426-4653. That's 844-426-4653.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. So here we are on the record, and we're finally ready to kind of dive into something that most people have been avoiding. You've seen a lot of headlines, but you've not seen guts. You've not seen the inner workings of what this Iran thing was all about. Was it really about oil? Was it about nuclear weapons? Or was it just Trump pissed off at somebody he just didn't like? Or maybe it was all three. Maybe it was all the above, Chris.
Yeah, I think really when you look at President Trump's foreign policy, you always have to look through the prism of China. And he sees the threat of China, the fact that he was handed a really bad hand from 25 years of bad policy as it relates to China. And so I think when you look at his decision-making, he's always looking at how to get America back on top in terms of technology, in terms of military capability, in terms of energy production. He was handed a bad hand, and he's trying to do what he can to fix it. And so I think what we've seen is the work in Venezuela, cutting off oil to oil exports to China. We've seen now in Iran, cutting off oil exports to China. They're working to systemically give us an advantage in terms of both resources and with precious metals and minerals to get us back on equal footing with China right now. People don't want to really realize that we're kind of behind on a lot of things that China's been doing for the last 20 years. And so the president, I think rightfully, is concerned about that and is taking steps that he can to do it. Now, I don't think that's a public debate that he's having. And I think that's partly intentional, but also partly kind of looking at his long-term strategic value. This is a man who values the art of the deal and values strategic thinking in business. And I think that's how he's approaching his job as president in the White House. And we're seeing the effects of that sometimes negatively in terms of the world economy, but also I think we know that a singular vision that he's trying to do is to try to put America on a better footing on the international stage. I think that's an underwritten story over the last 20 years.
Yeah, and so that is exactly right. When you get handed a bag of rocks, that really you're sitting there going, okay, I've got an administration. In theory, he's put the people together to try to help fix these things, but the bag of rocks was, I think, bigger, deeper, heavier, worse than he thought. I think it was more about Pandora's box with the bag of rocks kind of on top of it. He got that layer, and then next thing you know, he's like, "Whoa, hey, what's beneath the rocks? What's beneath the rocks is not good," and that was China's push to really make China great again from a standpoint of their own domestic policy and strategic initiatives, financially and military, to make them great all over the world. I mean, they owned it. They owned it all. Let me go down this rabbit hole here really quick because it's a really good one. And so the question is now that we've got a third battles, I think a carrier group or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. France, I think, is bringing an aircraft carrier group as well.
Yeah. So let me read this headline to you today, because this is fresh off the wire today. So the CEO of Aramco, and for anybody who hasn't heard of Aramco, that's like a $7 trillion company or something. It's a big oil company. It's quite impressive, actually. So CEO Amin Nasser warned that further disruptions to global energy supply could prove catastrophic as tensions in the Middle East continue to escalate. Underscoring the precarious nature of the situation, Nasser said in comments to analysts and investors on Tuesday morning that the Iran war is the biggest crisis the region's oil and gas industry has ever faced. I would say that's the minimum because it's global now. So especially Japan and South Korea, I mean, their market has dropped like 20% or something crazy the other day. The disruption has caused a severe chain reaction in not only shipping and insurance, but there's also a drastic domino effect on aviation, agriculture, automotive, and other industries, Nasser said. So what sounds like this would be catastrophic consequences for the world's oil markets the longer this disruption goes on. Okay, here's my question. If it is more drastic, the consequences for the global economy, that's going to take us down. I mean, that's got to lower our GDP. That's got to lower the consumer-based overseas buying our stuff, the tourism. That's going to hurt hospitality. It could hurt Airbnb. It could hurt everything that people do when they get here, especially the tourists. But not only that, if cruise stays above that $80 mark, that's still going to be probably a shock of about, I'm guessing, about a 3.5% to 4% CPI, possibly PPI, even core inflation rates as we continue this mess. What's your thoughts?
I mean, this has the negative impact of COVID with the increase of stagflation and cost increases. During COVID, when we shut down the economy, which is one of the biggest blunders in kind of financial, economic, and global policy history, oil dropped to I think $40 a barrel at one point, and so at least from a standpoint of economic development, it was affordable. Yeah. Now we have disruption within the global economy, but we have oil hovering around 100 and, spiked yesterday at 115. And now we're looking at a higher rate of oil with, not the level of spend. So yeah, it impacts travel. It impacts everything. I mean, I love this show Landman. It really talked well about the oil industry overall and how impactful it is on everything, whether it's plastics, whether it's, even wind turbines use oil to lubricate their facilities. Everything was run on oil in this economy. And if you have a 60% disruption in the market that comes out of the Strait of Hormuz to Asia, that impacts everything from trade to everything. We saw a huge downward shift in the market after just some tariff decisions from the president last year. We're looking at a tariff issue times 10 relative to the global impact, because this is talking about the actual supply chain globally, not just to the United States. So I think that's a real issue that's not really being affected in the market so far, but something we need to really keeping an eye on, because really, this has a downward impact on everything relative to produce. We've seen over and over again from our own farmers that the tariffs have done a pretty big number on exports in terms of soybeans and other things. If there's no place to even take those on the global market because this is such a disruption in Asia and the Middle East, this could have massive impacts in Europe.
So Europe doesn't have any oil of their own anyway, do they? Other than
Norway, it comes from Iran. So we have a lot of work here in terms of seeing the ripple effects of this decision to do it. Now, I trust the president's decision making on it, but I think there's a lot of unforeseen consequences of such a destabilizing effort that we still have to deal with.
Okay. Well, Europe's a tough one.
Yeah. Well,
Europe's a tough one. I mean, these people, Germany makes great cars. Italians make great things, goods. Their clothes are phenomenal. I hear their jewelry is equally as good. I mean, too. And then Switzerland makes great watches. I mean, they all have their talents. The leather. Yes. I'm telling you, those cars, Ferrari. But here's the problem. Those are great things to have, but we know what the primary needs are. With the first need, you got to have some oil and gas, man, right, to make that stuff, which they have none. There is no oil and gas exploration in Western Europe and limited Eastern until you go to Russia or some of the Baltics, Azerbaijan or Afghanistan and Pakistan. They have oil, but they're not part of Europe's little union.
Well, we've seen a lack of really good leadership in Europe. Besides Maloney in Italy, who's a true rock star, we're seeing Starmer in the UK. We're seeing Macron in France, really making unwise decisions, both from an economic standpoint and from a cultural standpoint. So Europe's in a lot of trouble right now. And when you see this instability like this that we're seeing in the international order, goodness, I'd be short in Europe if a little bit right now, aside from Italy, because Maloney's a rock star. But
She is.
she's great. But we need about 5 more Maloneys over there to really kind of get Europe back into place, because they're just not thinking strategically. They don't even think about the next 20 years. They're thinking about the next 20 minutes. And it's unfortunate to see such bad leadership over there right now.
It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. So here's a question that I have that I'm not so sure is easily to be answered right this second, because we don't know the consequences yet. We've seen oil prices go up. $1.25 went up in a week. We had and a half for gas. Now, by any stretch of the imagination, a dollar was like a 30% increase in some of these markets, states and what have you. So that's going to become an issue. So the CPI, the PPI, even the core is going to go up. Transportation. What's going to happen with all the things we import, all the goods and services that we can do here domestically, but all the things we still import that are solely dependent upon to keep our economy going. So here's something that's interesting. When you start to look at the U.S. steps up, Iran strikes as oil industry faces more upheaval. Okay, Let's go back to this whole thing again with oil. We know that there's a couple of things here that come into play that aren't always on the headlines. What happened in Venezuela is tied to Iran. These are two interlocking situations, right? Two scenarios here and two events that took place in order to be able to slow down the progressive growth of China on an international basis. When Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth made the comments during a press conference Tuesday, they suggested that the U.S.-Israeli campaign that began on February 28th, which has been some time now, will still have some time to run, creating further disruption in the oil industry and global markets. Now, we've seen oil come down, hit 119 or something crazy the other night. Holy cow. Now we're back down to 87, 88, which people say, oh my God, it's way down. No, dude, it was $65 a barrel a month ago. That's right. Okay, so we're still 30% higher. Now, equate that into the economy, both global and domestic. That means everybody else is paying higher prices. That's going to be translated in those products being sold to us as higher prices. We still have the tariff issue. So let's go back here to the topic. So Hegseth is like, oh, we're going to continue to have a conflict here. We're going to have a third carrier group head on over. And I'm like, well, we're spending over $1 billion a day on the war. What's another $500 billion a day for another carrier group? But translate that into inflation, man. Think about that. It's made, it's transported, distributed. Everything comes from oil and gas industry. And if it's up 30% here, it's up 30% all the way around the world.
Well, and think about it just from a U.S. standpoint. When gas is more expensive, that means the trucking that takes groceries to grocery stores gets more expensive. When families have a harder time filling the pump, it means they make decisions. They don't go out to eat as much. They restrict their individual spending, because you have to be able to continue to commute to get to your job and take the kids to school and just do your regular errands. And so when everything has a 30% increase, and also it has a ripple effect on all the prices within, and it starts to actually cut spending in terms of priorities. So people go to the doctor less. People live on fewer harder decisions in terms of how to make ends meet for people who can't afford it. And so you see not only the ripple effect from inflation, but you see it from spending going way down on things that kind of help keep our economy going. Again, you mentioned tourism. It's so much more than tourism. It's about the consumer economy. When those budgets get restricted, that consumer economy gets really going. Where what waitresses and bartenders and folks who are in the hospitality industry have fewer hours to work and less tips, because ultimately all that's coming out from going to gas and oil. So every dollar at the pump has a tremendous impact on the actual kind of consumption level within the United States. And so it's inflationary, but it's also negatively impactful in terms of spending. So it has just such a massive ripple effect. What you said, first and foremost, gas and oil is really important, and it is, because it impacts every other industry in the country, whether it's insurance, whether it's banking, whether it's sporting events. All of it is impacted by gas. And so with a 30% increase over time, that's going to have a massive impact on people's pocketbooks and really the impact on people's outlook for the economy. When you're going to look at a potential downturn, people get really angry, and all of a sudden that's going to have a political impact in Washington as well.
Oh, 100%. In fact, let me kind of go down this road. If I can't even try to get through all some of this, because some of the comments that are coming out of the White House in the last couple of days seem to sound like they were more resonant, or certainly gives you the feeling that things were calming down a little bit. But the comments coming out today are just the opposite. We are concerned at the apparent lack of joint plan on how this war came quickly to be brought to a convincing conclusion. That's what the German chancellor said. They're like, wait a second, you just blew up half the Middle East. You've destroyed about a third of the world's economy. And literally, I mean, did you see the headlines? Hedge funds in the U.S. lost billions of dollars and gave back 2 years worth of profits. So it did everybody else around the world. I mean, my God, the stock markets were crashing. And so that's why the German chancellor, the Friedrich Merz guy, who goes, wait a second, you're telling me you're coming in here and destroying all this, and now you're saying, wait a second, hold on. You didn't have any kind of joint plan with any of us. You just did it. Didn't even notify us. You just did it. And I think that's what's pissing people off a lot too, is the administration was taking the kind of the high road that this is our fight, our war, you're not involved in it, so go away, which really, I think the coalition of NATO was all about, right? The uniform together, working together in some kind of a unity. Let me kind of go down some of the ramifications that worsening disruption here in the States. Oil refineries are going to have less oil because obviously we just still import oil. You can't just turn a domestic tap on.
That's right.
We can't do it. It takes months. And if you're lucky, it might take a year, and that's fast to be able to ramp up. Now, California's in a quagmire because they were under this crazy cap and trade climate change law. They've lost like 3 of the largest refineries.
Who's in charge of California?
This is due to a slip back here. Give me a second.
I was just going to say Democrats, but yes.
Yeah, I know. I know. Look, anybody who thinks that climate change, since the U.S. is 0.004% of the greenhouse gases, which we need those so trees can live, that we're going to sit there and destroy an entire country, and we're trying to destroy our entire economy.
Yep.
You've destroyed California with this unbelievably stupid idea that somehow you're going to be the pillars of social justice and destroy 47 million people's livelihood. Do you understand what they've done? Well, this could quagmire into a national issue if this thing continues to go on and Iran continues to fight back. And now they've got desalination facilities are being destroyed, so there's no water in like 6 different Gulf countries. There's no oil being pumped. There's no fuel being refined. So now the cars can't work in I mean, this is bad. That's right. Like, this is bad. And I love Trump, and I've always been supportive. And I'm like, but maybe you kind of should have let those neighbors know that you were going to destroy their economy with this, because oil. So here it is, addressing concerns about soaring energies. Trump said that the U.S. Navy will escort tankers to maintain a steady oil supply through the Strait of Hormuz. And that's right. That should have been talked about a week ago. Then a lot of this stuff would not have happened. I mean, it's really about effective communication anyway. I mean, you're a PR guy.
Yeah.
Doesn't communicate come somewhere into the top 5 things we should do when we're trying to like let people know stuff?
I honestly think part of this is the president seeing the mistakes from Iraq in 2003 and trying to go the opposite direction. President Bush, rightly or wrongly, spent a year kind of making the case for Iraq, and so everyone wasn't surprised when it happened. So I think there was a lot of time for discussion. Aside from the military buildup in the Middle East that President Trump was doing, it still seemed like a surprise that the attack actually happened. And so, some of those contingency plans probably weren't put into place because I think a lot of people just weren't necessarily prepared. We saw the articles of folks being stranded over the Middle East because the State Department just wasn't ready for extraction. Mm-hmm. So even when our own government, who's working with the president on that, couldn't keep up, I think it's the allies were certainly playing catch up. President Trump's a game changer. He does not play by normal rules, so that gets baked into the cake, and we all have to play catch up to that. Having allies is important to this, and I think people still kind of keep up with the president because they know America's still the best option in terms of freedom and opportunity in the world. And so even when our allies may be getting, secondhand information when it comes to global initiatives, they've got to stay intact, because ultimately that this is where things are going. So, I think it's incumbent on all of our allies to be helpful and figure out how we can kind of get through this, because ultimately that's the best way our economy rebounds, but also how trade and international relationships continue to flourish.
That's well said. That's well said. Only problem is what are we gonna do at $90 barrel of oil?
We got to get it down. Wow, production. I mean, I was encouraged. I was encouraged.
Domestic production, like get domestic production.
Also, Venezuela has more oil and natural resources than the Middle East, and that's becoming a more stable ally for the U.S. after our work getting Maduro out 2 months ago. So, like you said, you're exactly right. It takes months to turn these things on. It takes a long time to kind of create production. I have no idea what the infrastructure is like in Venezuela for oil extraction, aside from the fact that I know that a lot of it is going to China.
A lot.
But if you drill the infrastructure to reorient that towards the Americas, well, okay, that could actually lower prices quickly. But it takes a lot of effort and work with private sector. I'm sure our the oil and gas industry would love to be helpful in terms of getting that production going. And so relying on the private markets of America, which are the best in the world, to get in there and do that, I think is something that can actually lead to that. But it's going to be a transition for a little bit, because it has to be. But yeah, I'd rather have $90 oil than $150 oil, but ultimately we got to get it back down to the 70s and 80s to really kind of see the economy humming.
Yeah, and even at $70, we can make money on domestic oil production. Right, everybody's making money. Right. So Brent crude climbed to just a hair under 120 a barrel on early Monday, a couple days ago, and then now we're down to about that $90 level on that Brent, and then I think U.S. is around 87. But here's what's interesting: oil is still 50% higher than the start of the year, just 3 months ago.
Wow,
did you know that?
No,
50%. Yeah.
Over the year?
No, just since the first of the year. First of the year.
So
Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and United Arab Emirates, UAE, and Kuwait have lowered their collective output by nearly 7 million barrels a day. Okay, that is massive when you think about the global, especially in their world, because that money, they're like any other government, they spend, right? They need that money. There's little sign the Hormuz Strait can be opened quickly without at least a complete pause in hostilities, because there's no insurance and nobody's going to risk that. And so when the chief executive officer of Saudi Aramco, if you again look up Aramco, big company, called the disruption the biggest crisis in the region's oil and gas history, I don't think he was joking.
Well, let's not forget gas blends. When summer blends come out, they're more expensive, and so we're hitting we're March, April, so we're getting into warmer temperatures. So the refineries are going to be making summer blends, which are actually about 30 to 40 cents more expensive on average than winter blends. So not only are we looking at an increase from the market, we're looking at an increase of actual gas blends. So we need to take that into account too, as we're looking into the travel summer months and how expensive that's going to be.
Yeah, that is it. Let's do this. Let's talk a little bit about the economy in general, how this is going to affect elections. So let's do that for about 2 minutes. I know you've got to go to another appointment, and even though our show is nearly an hour long, you'll be back. That's right, you'll be back. So, and we'll finish part 2 on this, but let's just dive into the elections now, and then we'll finish it. How bad is this going to be, or could it be affecting us with these higher prices? I heard this word affordability once is becoming a little more clairvoyant in the young people's telepathic, democratic, progressive, socialist minds and their way of thinking. I'm not sure it all resonates in reality, but it resonates with them.
Yep.
And especially at the voter box.
Yep.
So what's going to happen?
I think Republicans are looking at a shellacking right now. If Sir 20 has this change, and potentially 28, but 26 first. This is the thinnest majority in the House in history, and so Speaker Johnson really only has one vote to give on any massive party line vote. So it's already precarious for Republicans in the House. I think Kalshi has it at 80% chance of Democrats taking over the House, I don't see a scenario, particularly if there's an economic downturn. People vote with their pocketbooks. End of story. Or that's a fact. And so anybody that's upset about their lack of affordability or gas prices or anything else is going to absolutely take it out on it's just, you can't upend that trend. Even as unpopular as Democrat policies are, and even as unpopular as Democrats are, when people feel pain at the pump and people could feel pain in their pocketbooks, they're going to make a change in their voting. And so I think the House is very, very unlikely to stay in Republican hands. The Senate is a little more of a challenge because there's just so many seats. But, depending on what happens in this primary, the Texas race becomes a little more interesting. I actually think even if Paxton wins this nomination, I think Texas is still red. I think, a blue Texas has been a Democrat, fever dream for a long time. And I just think Texas is still pretty red. However, Cornyn's a surefire win for the Republicans. I think Paxton we have to spend a little more money as Republicans, but we'll see how that works out. But Susan Collins in Maine is always a tough race. But we're also seeing, new states are coming in that may not necessarily be on the radar for a lot of people. Iowa, Alaska. There's several different paths for Republicans to, have to defend that aren't normal states. And so if you start seeing a shift by a couple more points, the whole map changes. And so that's going to be a real challenge for them.
Okay. Well, stay tuned. We're going to be right back, and we're going to finish this dialogue on the election of 26 and 28. There's a lot of things that are going to affect it. There always is, though, right? It's kind of that. But this is probably one of the most localized with a demographic to 18 to 36. They don't really trust Israel these days. They're not crazy about wars. They don't have affordability. And quite honestly, they just don't like the Republican Party's agenda for all the reasons why that, plus more. So we'll be right back. And we're back on the record here in just a couple of minutes.
Gold has more than tripled since September 2022, rising from $1,656 per ounce to over $5,000 by February 2026. That's a 205% gain, outperforming the market, and proving why gold is the ultimate long-term hedge. As global debt soars and currencies weaken, central banks are hoarding gold at record pace. Why aren't you? Call 844-426-4653 or visit bmcham.com. Protect your future with real assets. Own gold now.